faint hum of machinery drifted through the wall, mingling with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Richard Kingston, the CEO of a thriving logistics company, stood by his window, glaring at the neighboring house. There she was again, Margaret Haynes, the scientist's wife, trimming hedges with an efficiency that seemed almost unnatural. She had been at it since sunrise. He turned to his wife, Clara, who was still in her robe, sipping tea and scrolling through her phone. "She's always working," he muttered, his voice tight with frustration. "Why can't you be more like her?" Clara frowned, her grip tightening on the mug. The story unfolds in Buenos Aires, a pristine suburban neighborhood where the lawns are perfectly manicured, and the facades of the houses hide the shadows within. The scientist, Dr. Alan Haynes, was an enigmatic figure, rarely seen except when tending to his elaborate garden or tinkering in his basement. His wife, Margaret, was the neighborhood marvel, a beacon of diligence and energy. She could bake a pie, mow the lawn, clean the gutters, and host a dinner party without breaking a sweat. Richard couldn't stop comparing Clara to Margaret. "Why can't you contribute more?" he asked one morning after Margaret had run by their house, jogging effortlessly in the crisp dawn air. Clara tried to meet his expectations, but her health began to falter under the strain. As the weeks passed, Richard pushed harder, comparing her every move to Margaret's flawless routine. One evening, Clara collapsed in the kitchen, her hand clutching her chest. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. Richard was racked with guilt, but his sorrow quickly turned to curiosity. No, obsession. He began to watch Margaret more closely. How could she manage so much, day in and day out, without ever seeming tired or overwhelmed? He confronted Alan one rainy evening. "How does your wife do it?" he demanded, his voice trembling with desperation. Alan's expression darkened. "What are you talking about?" "Margaret," Richard spat. "Clara's dead because I tried to make her like your wife. What's your secret? Vitamins? Some experimental therapy?" Alan sighed heavily. "Come inside, Yanama," he said, gesturing toward the dimly lit house. Inside the Haynes residence, Richard noticed something strange. The house was spotless, but there were no personal touches, no family photos, no knickknacks, no sign of a life lived. Alan led him down to the basement, where the hum of machinery grew louder. "You want the truth?" Alan asked, flipping a switch. The basement illuminated to reveal a laboratory filled with wires, schematics, and a series of lifelike mannequins. In the center stood Margaret, her face eerily serene, her eyes blinking in slow, mechanical precision. Richard stumbled back. "What is this?" "Margaret isn't human," Alan admitted. "She's a robot, a project I started years ago after my first wife left me. I wanted a partner who wouldn't complain, wouldn't falter, wouldn't leave." Richard stared at Margaret in horror. "So all this time, You envied a machine," Alan finished. "She's perfect because she's programmed to be. But perfection isn't human, Richard. You pushed Clara to her death, trying to compete with something that doesn't feel pain, love, or exhaustion." The story teaches a powerful lesson about the dangers of comparing ourselves and others to unrealistic standards of perfection. Richard's obsession with Margaret's tireless efficiency blinded him to the humanity of his own wife, Clara. In striving for what he perceived as ideal, he not only lost his wife, but also his own peace of mind. Through Alan's revelation that Margaret was a machine, the story underscores that perfection is an illusion, something artificial and unattainable in the real world. True fulfillment comes not from striving for flawlessness, but from accepting the imperfections and vulnerabilities that make us human. The tragedy of Clara's death reminds us that people have limits, and love requires patience, understanding, and respect for those limits. By valuing comparison over compassion, Richard ultimately destroyed the very thing he should have cherished. The beautiful story tells us that pursuing perfection at the expense of humanity leads to emptiness. True worth lies in embracing imperfections and valuing the unique qualities of those around us.